Everything Counts by Aidoo. She used to look at their serious faces and laugh silently to herself. They meant what they were saying. The only thing was that, loving them all as sister, lover, and mother, she also knew them. She knew them as intimately as the hems of her dresses. That it was so much easier for them to talk about the beauty of being oneself, not to struggle to look like white girls, not straightening one's hair, and above all, not to wear the wig. The wig. Ah, the wig. They say it is made of artificial fiber. Others swear that if it is not gypsy hair, then it is Chinese. Extremists are sure they are made from the hairs of dead white folks. This one gave her nightmares, for she has read somewhere, a long time ago, about Germans making lampshades out of Jewish people's skins, and she would shiver for all the world to see. At other times, when her world was sweet, like when she and Fifi were together, the pictures that came to her mind were not so terrible. She would just think about the words of that crazy high life song and laugh. The one about the people at home scrambling to pay exorbitant prices for second-hand clothing from America. And then, as a student of economics, she would also try to remember some other truths she knew about Africa. Second-rate experts giving first-class dangerous advice, or expressing uselessly fifth-rate opinions. Second-hand machinery from someone else's junkyard, snowplow from tropical farms, outmoded tractors, discarded aeroplanes, and now wigs made from other people's unwanted hair. At this point, though tough she was, tears would come into her eyes. Perhaps her people had really missed the boat of original thinking after all. And if Fifi asked her what was wrong, she explained, telling the same story every time. He always shook his head and laughed at her, which meant that, in the end, she would laugh with him. At the beginning, she used to argue with them earnestly. But what was wearing wigs got to do with this revolution? A lot, sister, they will say. How? She will ask, struggling not to understand. Because it means that we have no confidence in ourselves. Of course, she understood what they meant. But this is funny. Listen, my brothers, if we earnestly tackle the problems facing us, we wouldn't have time to worry about such trifles as wigs. She made them angry, not with the mild displeasure of brothers, but with the hatred of wounded lovers. They looked terrible, their eyes changing, turning red, and warning her that if she wasn't careful, they would destroy her. Ah, they frightened her a lot, quite often too, especially when she thought of what filled them with a kind of hatred. This was something else. She had always known that, in her society, men and women had more important things to do than to fight each other in the mind. It was not in school that she had learned this, because, one did not really go to school to learn about Africa. As for this, what did the experts call it? War of sexes? Yes. As for this war of sexes, if there had been any at all in the olden days among her people, they could not possibly have been on such a scale. These days, any little no one says to a boy's yes means one is asking for a battle. Oh, there just are too many problems. As for imitating whites, what else can one do? Seeing how some of our brothers behave, the things one has seen with one's own eyes, the stories one has heard about African politicians and diplomats abroad, but then one has enough troubles already without treading on big toes. After a time, she gave up arguing with them, her brothers, She just stated clearly that the wig was an easy way out as far as she was concerned. She could not afford to waste that much time on her hair. The wig was, after all, only a hat, a turban. Would they please leave her alone? What was more, if they really wanted to see a revolution, why didn't they work constructively in other ways for it? She shut them up, for they knew their own weaknesses too, that they themselves were neither prepared nor ready to face the realities and give up those aspects of their personal dream which stood between them and the meaningful actions they ought to take. Above all, she was really beautiful and intelligent. They loved and respected her. She didn't work that hard, and she didn't do brilliantly in the examination, but she passed and got a degree. 3 months later, she and Fifi agreed that it would be better for them to get married among a foreign people. Wedding at home were too full of misguided foolishness. She flew home a month after the wedding with no suitcases. The rest of her luggage was following them in a ship. Fifi would not be starting work for about 3 months, so he had branched off to visit some 1 or 2 African countries. Really, she had found it difficult to believe her eyes. How could she? From the air stewardesses to the grade 3 typists in the offices, every girl simply wore a wig, not cut discreetly short and disguised to look like her own hair, as she had tried to do with hers, but blatantly, aggressively, crudely. Most of them actually had masses of flowing curls falling on their shoulders, or huge affairs piled on top of their heads. Even that was not the whole story. Suddenly, it seemed as if all the girls and women she knew and remembered as having smooth black skin had turned light skin, not uniformly. Lord, people looked as though a terrible plague was sweeping through the land. A plague that made funny patchworks on faces and necks. She couldn't understand it, so she told herself she was dreaming. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Perhaps a new god had been born while she was away, for whom there was a new festival, and when the celebrations were over, they would remove the marks from their faces and those horrid looking things off their heads. A week went by, and the marks were still on. More than once, she thought of asking one of the girls she had been to school with what it was all about, but she restrained herself. She did not want to look more of a stranger than she already did, seeing she was also the one black girl in the whole city. Then the long vacation was over, and the students of the National University returned to campus. Oh, she was full of enthusiasm as she prepared her lectures for the first few weeks. She was going to tell them what and what. That, as students of economics, their role in nation building was going to be crucial. Much more than big mouth, big living politicians, they could do vital work to save the continent from the grip of its enemies, if only for a little while, and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, she was wearing her own hair, just lightly touched to make it easier to comb. In fact, she had been doing that since the day they had got married, the result of some hard bargaining. The final agreement was that any day of the year, she would be around with her own hair, but she could still keep that same by for emergencies. Anyhow, the first morning in her life as a lecturer arrived. She met the students at 11. They numbered between 15 and 20. About a third of them were girls. She had not seen them walk through, and so she could not tell whether they had beautiful bodies or not. But Lord, were their faces pretty? So she wondered, as she stared, mouth open at them, how she would have felt if she had been a young male. She smiled momentarily at herself for the silliness of the idea. It was a mistake to stop the smile. She should just have gone on to develop it into a laugh. For close at its heels was a jealousy so big, she did not know what to do with it. Who were these girls? Where had they come from to confront her with their youth? The fact that she wasn't really older than any of them did not matter, nor even that she recognized one or two who she had come at first year when she was in her fifth year. Little skinny greenhorn, scuttling timidly away to do their biddings as the house prefect. Little frightened lost creatures from villages and developing slums who had come to this citadel of an alien culture to be turned into ladies. And yet, she was there as a lecturer, talking about one thing or another. Perhaps it was an automation as the newest weapon from the industrially developed countries against the wretched ones of the earth, or something of that sort. Perhaps, since it was the first hour with them, she was only giving them general ideas of what the course was about. Anyhow, her mind was not there with them. Look at that one. Grace Mensa, poor thing. She had cried and cried when she was being told to use knives and forks. And now, look at her. It was then she noticed the wigs. All the girls were wearing them. The biggest one she had seen so far. She felt very hot, and she who hardly sweated realized that not only were her hands wet, but also streams of water were pouring from the nape of her neck down her spine. Her braces felt too tight. Later, she was thankful that black women have not yet learned to faint away in moments of extreme agitation. But what frightened her was that she could not stop the voice of one of the boys as it came from across the sea, from the foreign land where she had once been with them. But Cece, look here, we see what you mean, except that it is not the real point we are getting at. Traditionally, women from your area might have worn their hair long. However, you have still got to admit that there's an element of this wig wearing that is totally foreign, unhealthy. Eventually, the first horrid lecture was over. The girls came to greet her. They might have wondered what was wrong with this new lecturer, and so probably did the boys. She was not going to allow that to worry her. There always is something wrong with lecturers. Besides, she was going to have lots of opportunity to correct what bad first impressions she had created. The first few weeks came and went without changing anything. Indeed, things got worse and worse. When she went home to see her relatives, the questions they asked her were so painful that she could not find answers for them. What car are you bringing home, Cece? We hope it is not one of those little coconut shell with two doors, eh? And oh, we hope you brought a refrigerator, because you simply cannot find one here these days. And if you do, it costs so much. How could she tell them that cars and fridges are ropes with which we are hanging ourselves? She looked at their faces and wondered if they were the same old ones she had longed to see with such pain when she was away. She began to think she was in another country. Perhaps she had come down from the plane at the wrong airport, too soon, too late. Fifi had not arrived in the country yet. That might have had something to do with the sudden interest she developed in the beauty contest. It really wasn't a part of her, but there it was. Now, she was eagerly buying the morning newspaper to look out for the photos of the winners from the regions. Of course, the winner of the national level was going to enter the Miss Earth title. She knew all along that she would go to the stadium, and she did not find it difficult to get a good seat. She should have known that it would turn out like that. She had not thought any of the girls beautiful, but her opinion were not really asked for, were they? She just recalled later that all the contestants had worn wigs except one, the winner, the most light-skinned of them all. No, she didn't wear a wig. Her hair, a mulatto's, quite simple, quite naturally, fell in a relaxant mane on her shoulders. She hurried home and into the bathroom where she vomited and cried and vomited for what seemed to her to be days. And all this time, she was thinking of how right the boys had been. She would have liked to run to where they were, to tell them so, to ask them to forgive her for having dared to contradict them. They had been so very right, her brothers, lovers, and husbands. But nearly all of them were still abroad, in Europe, America, or someplace else. They used to tell her that they found the thought of returning home frightening. They would be frustrated. Others were still studying for one or two more degrees, a master's here, a doctorate there. That was the other thing about the revolution.